Welcome to the Hindu Daily. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into some really significant and sometimes quite somber developments shaping India right now. We're going to kick things off by looking at this striking paradox. You see global terrorism seemingly evolving, getting more intense, sparking these sort of doomsday predictions about AI threats, bioweapons, you name it. But here in India, we seem to be seeing something different, a unique decline, particularly in ideologically driven terrorism like Naxalism. Now, our sources point out that, making predictions here has always been a hazardous task, yet leaders keep making them. And that brings us straight to the Union Home Minister's recent declaration. He's talking about the near end of Naxalism, maybe by mid-2026. So to really get a handle on what this means, let's unpack Naxalism a bit. What was it like in its heyday? The sources we looked at really remind us of that revolutionary fervor. It attracted, as the article puts it, the best and the brightest back in the 1960s. You had this movement inspired by Chairman Mao, Che Guevara, capturing the imagination of young people, intellectuals, and the wretched of the earth tribals, the urban poor. The slogan was literally, China's chairman is our chairman. Quite something.
It really was. And it's crucial to remember the historical context, as you said. The material points out these false dawns we've seen before. Remember the late 70s? Violence seemed to dip. Happened again twice before 2000. So the question is, what makes this time potentially different? Why the confidence now? Well, the argument is that the movement itself changed. It sort of degenerated into mindless violence, lost that original ideological sheen. It also fragmented, split into regional groups. That initial all-India idea really shrunk, concentrating in places like Dandakaranya, these hilly forested areas.
Okay, so fragmentation and maybe a loss of the original ideology.
Exactly. And then you have this sustained offensive against the Naxalite groups, really kicking off in 2024 under the Home Minister's direction. It's quite telling that the CPI, Maoist, that's the main group, admitted in their own booklet recently that they lost 357 Naxalites in encounters just last year.
Wow.
Yeah, and over a third of those killed were women cadre. That points to a significant hit. Their territory shrinking, there's internal bickering, leadership issues since Ganapathy was removed back in 2018. And if you zoom out strategically, it's interesting to compare this campaign against Naxalism with, say, the U.S. war on terror. Very different approaches. The U.S. often used, significant force against external enemies groups. The source says didn't really have an ideology beyond attacking the Great Satan. India's approach had more checks and balances on using lethal force because these Naxalites weren't just outsiders. They were deeply connected, identified with local villagers.
So more like dealing with a domestic insurgency with complex roots.
Precisely. It wasn't just about eliminating an external threat. It was about addressing something that had sprung, however problematically, from within a section of the population itself.
And that leads us to this really crucial and often debated distinction the source makes. The difference between that original Naxalite movement, structured, principled, even if violent, and this modern term, urban Naxals. The article suggests today's urban Naxals are more like a, quote, loose-knit group of intellectuals opposed to the administration on policy issues. It claims they have little in common with the original Naxalites. So what's the big deal about this distinction? Why does it matter?
Well, the source warns that this wrong classification, using the term urban Naxals loosely, could have serious unintended consequences. It's not just about words. It risks blurring the line between, say, legitimate intellectual dissent and actual armed insurgency.
Ah, okay.
And if you blur that line, the state could end up inadvertently criminalizing opposition, which, ironically, might just create deeper divisions. It stresses avoiding what it calls blind spots from cognitive bias when tackling these complex internal issues.
Got it. A really important nuance there. Okay, let's shift gears now. From internal security, let's look outwards, towards India's growing role in the global digital world. We're going to explore a pretty big development, the India-U.K. Digital Trade Compact. This is Chapter 12 of the big Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, and it's definitely sparking a policy debate, isn't it? Balancing strategic gains versus, digital sovereignty. So let's dig into the details first. What are the clear digital wins for businesses coming out of this?
Right, well, the agreement does quite a few things. It recognizes electronic signatures and contracts and commits both sides to work towards making them mutually recognized. That means practically less red tape for software as a service companies, easier entry for smaller businesses.
Okay.
Then you have paperless trade, electronic invoicing again, simplifying cross-border stuff, documentation, payments, and maybe most crucially, there's policy continuity on zero customs duties for electronic transmissions. That protects India's huge software export pipeline. The Commerce Ministry values that at around $30 billion a year. That's significant.
30 billion, wow. And beyond just the digital side, the wider deal.
Yes, the broader CETA promises other benefits too. Experts think nearly 99% of Indian goods could enter the UK duty-free soon. Take textiles, tariffs could drop sharply, maybe from 12% down to 0 on some key lines. That's a massive boost for places like Tirupur and Ludhiana.
Big textile hubs, yeah.
Exactly. Plus, analysts see new opportunities for Indian IT firms in British public procurement. And things like Social Security waivers for short assignments could cut payroll costs, maybe by about 20%. It's all about making trade smoother, more predictable.
Okay, so quite a few potential upsides, but what about the flip side? The digital costs, the concerns people are raising.
Yes, that's where the debate really gets interesting. A major point of friction is the ban on demanding source code inspection as a sort of default regulatory tool. Critics look at this and say, hold on, this is India giving up some digital sovereignty.
Right.
However, it's nuanced. The agreement doesn't completely forbid it. Regulators can still demand access, but it has to be case by case, linked specifically to an investigation or a court process. So it's not the default anymore, but the power is still there in specific circumstances.
I see. So not an absolute ban, but a change in how it's normally done.
Precisely. And another crucial point, government procurement is out of scope for this digital trade chapter. That means if the government is buying software or systems, it can still demand source code access as needed. That's not restricted.
Okay, that's an important clarification.
Definitely. And there's also what they call a general security exception. This basically lets India keep supervising critical infrastructure, power grids, payment systems, even if they're privately run. The restriction on demanding access is mainly aimed at preventing disguised trade barriers, not undermining genuine security needs.
Got it. What about data flows? That's always a big concern.
Right. The source material clarifies that India's commitments on releasing government data are voluntary. It's not legally binding in the sense that anyone can demand any data set. India decides what to publish and how. If it does publish data, it should be machine-readable, easy to reuse, but it's India's call.
So control is maintained there.
Yes. And there's no automatic most favored nation, or MFN clause, for cross-border data flows. Instead, they've set up a forward review mechanism. Basically, if either India or the UK later signs a deal with someone else that has tougher data rules, they'll talk about maybe extending those terms. It's a commitment to consult, not an automatic upgrade.
Okay, so it's complex, but there are safeguards built in. And this brings us to the idea of building more guardrails for these digital agreements going forward. What's being suggested?
Yeah, the article lays out a few concrete steps. One is accrediting trusted labs to review sensitive source code under strict confidentiality rules. Another is mandating clear audit trail for cross-border data so you can track where data goes and who's responsible.
Makes sense.
Also, institutionalizing broad consultations before negotiations are finalized. Get all the stakeholder input early on. And interestingly, given how fast AI is moving, think ChatGPT versions popping up so quickly, the source suggests futures digital treaties should be reviewed perhaps every 3 years, not the usual 5, just to keep pace with the risks.
3 years instead of 5, that's quite a shift.
It reflects the speed of change in the digital space.
So taking all this together, what's the bigger picture message here?
Well, it really seems to reflect India's shift, moving away from, say, trade skepticism towards more strategic engagement in the global digital economy. The underlying idea seems to be that aligning with modern trade rules makes sense for India's ambitions. It shows that sovereignty and global engagement aren't necessarily opposing forces. They can actually work together to power the economy.
Right, finding that balance. Okay, a fascinating look at the digital frontier. Now, let's turn to our final story. And this one takes us back to the raw power of nature and, unfortunately, a very human tragedy. We're talking about Dharali village in Utrecht, a place quite literally swallowed by a deluge back on August 5th. Try to picture this. It's high up, 2,700 meters above sea level. It used to be a key stop for pilgrims heading to Gangotri Temple. Now, it's buried under 30, even 40 meters of sludge and debris, the sounds of temple bells replaced by earth movers.
It's truly devastating.
The human cost is just staggering. So far, only one body recovered. 69 people are still missing. That includes 9 army personnel and 25 Nepali workers who were there. Rescue teams managed to airlift about 1,400 people out by helicopter. But the destruction, the government says around 150 hotels, homestays, shops, and those precious apple orchards are just gone, wiped out. And the personal stories are just heartbreaking. You hear about Lakraj Singh, a laborer, looking for his son Yogesh, Kali Devi, whose son called her saying he won't survive just before the line went dead. Jai Bhagwan Panwar lost his nephew, his hotel, his orchards, and Sanjay Panwar losing his life savings, saying, in utter despair, it would have been better if I had died. At least my family would have got compensation. Just awful.
It's incredibly difficult to even comprehend that level of loss,
Yeah.
and the rescue operations themselves face enormous challenges. Retrieving the missing bodies is proving next to impossible, according to the reports. There's continuous water flowing under the debris pile.
Underneath it. Okay.
Yes, which makes it incredibly unstable. And the whole area is so fragile they can't use heavy digging machinery. The vibrations could trigger more landslides.
Right.
Plus, the constant rains. They clear some sludge, it rains again, and they're basically back to square one. They're fighting the immediate aftermath, the weather, and the fundamental geology of the place.
And connecting this to the bigger environmental picture, this wasn't entirely unforeseen, was it?
No, unfortunately not. Geologists like Navin Juyal and Himat Dhyani, who were actually involved in expert bodies after the 2013 Kedarnath disaster, they explicitly warned this was inevitable in Dharali. They explained that Dharali, like many settlements there, is built on what's called debris flow or alluvial fan deposit. It's basically loose material deposited by streams coming off glaciers in a very fragile paraglacial zone, highly prone to landslides, debris flows.
So known risks.
Known risks. And here's a critical and perhaps frustrating detail the source highlights. Even after the huge damage in 2013, an RCC wall, a concrete retaining wall, was built right next to the stream in Dharali. But instead of deterring construction, it seems to have encouraged it. People built hotels, resorts, right up against the stream, relying on the wall. That directly contributed to how bad the damage was this time.
Wow. So a measure meant perhaps for safety actually increased the vulnerability.
It appears that way,
Yeah.
tragically. And the psychological toll on the survivors is immense.
I can only imagine.
Villagers are reporting severe anxiety, sleeplessness. They talk about this feeling of drowning whenever they try to close their eyes. Health posts have been set up just to deal with the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You even had pregnant women like Ranika Sai, 9 months pregnant, working in an orchard, needing to be airlifted out. Now she's left with nothing, dealing with skin infections, no clean clothes, just unimaginable hardship.
So wrapping this up, what does this awful story tell us? What are the broader implications?
Well, Dharali isn't just a natural disaster statistic. It's a stark, brutal example of how development, maybe short-sighted development, in these incredibly fragile ecosystems, especially when warnings are ignored, inevitably clashes with nature's power. And the human cost is devastating. As one hotelier, Nandan Bisht, put it so powerfully, when rivers decide to claim their course, everything that comes in their way witnesses a similar fate.
A chilling quote.
It really is. It leaves us with this profound question, doesn't it? Are we truly learning the lessons for these recurring tragedies? Or are we just fated to repeat these cycles of destruction as we try to balance human desires for pilgrimage, tourism, livelihoods against the undeniable forces and the, perhaps, wisdom of these fragile environments? Something to really reflect on.
Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.